Welcome to you all to the meeting of this council, and may I first of all remind you of some domestic arrangements. Toilets are situated outside the meeting room opposite the stairs. Cold water is also available in the breakout area outside the meeting room. If the fire alarm should sound, please leave the meeting room by following the fire exit signs and meet on the Ipswich Town Football Club training pitch. Do not re-enter the building until you are told it is safe to do so. And can I ask that you switch off all mobile phones or turn them to silent, please? I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting, you are also consenting to being filmed by the council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. Council members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. Thank you. Can I move to the agenda, please? Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillors Manley Barrett, Carpendale, Gould, Grandon, Holt, Hurren, Malvesi, Norman, Maybury, Parker, Ward, Jan Osborne and Councillor Hardacre. Councillors, if you haven't already done so, please could you mark yourself as present in the modern.gov app, please.
Thank you for that. Item 2, declarations of interest by councillors. Are there any declarations of interest? Thank you. I turn to item 3, BC 21/19, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of September 2021 for accuracy only. Are there any issues with accuracy? Then could I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Arthur. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Sue Ayres. Councillor Sue Ayres, thank you. I will now ask the Senior Governance Officer to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the vote is now in progress on your modern.gov app. Please scroll down to the blue line.
I'm an approve. I've just logged into the previous meeting, so I'll catch up eventually.
Thank you. Councillor Beer, may I take your vote verbally, please? Councillor Newman? Thank you very much. Chair, that's unanimous. That's 19 votes for.
Mr. Chairman, I'm point of order. I can hardly hear you. Can you get nearer to the mic? Thank you. I'll move it to one side.
Sorry, Peter. Where were we? Oh, yeah, item 4. Announcements from the Chairman and Leader, BC 21/20. I refer to the paper BC 21/20 for noting, but I'd just like to say that I was extremely pleased at being at the meeting and would like to congratulate all the officers that took part in the local energy showcase. It was a great event, and thank you all for being there and putting it on. Thank you. Councillor Ward has pre-recorded his leader's announcements as he is not able to be here, and we will now play that recording.
Bear with me a moment, Chair.
Good evening, everyone. Unfortunately, I can't be with you all in person this evening as I have a very bad cold and cough. It is definitely nothing more. I have done 2 lateral flow tests and 1 PCR test, and all were negative. This is the first of additional council meetings designed to enable members to participate in debates on a range of topics. We are reinstating cabinet member reports. We have the first 2 this month. We are introducing debates on current live issues and topics of interest as an alternative to member briefings, which are not always well attended. This evening, we will be discussing the current status of COVID recovery in Babergh, covering business confidence, its lingering impact and ongoing changes to the behaviour of our residents. Finally, we will also be having a series of location reports from different parts of the district. There will be a rolling programme running from east to west, and this will start next year. I hope you will value these themes, and please feedback any comments or suggestions you may have. Last week, an all-member briefing from the Economic Development team was held. This was excellent and highlighted the huge amount of activity and projects delivered in the district. Our approach to supporting innovation is getting recognition nationally, and we are definitely having an impact on stimulating the post-COVID economy and delivering jobs. Yesterday marked the start of our new in-house public realm service. 15 new members of staff arrived at the Stowmarket depot, and Councillor Dawson was there to welcome them alongside our officers. I'd like to thank our project team for all their hard work over the past 12 months to make this such a success. As announced at the weekend, the government has agreed to Suffolk's request to be designated a COVID enhanced response area. We will get extra resources to increase vaccinations and provide other support. Increasing booster vaccinations and the vaccination rate for 12 to 15-year-olds are the main priorities. A walk-in service at Hadley Church on Saturday was very successful, with 2,030 people getting a jab. You will all have been aware of the recent exhibitions of plans for Bellevue Park in Sudbury. I want to thank the officers who were present for giving their time, particularly on the Saturday, and to all the councillors who also visited and spoke to many of the public there. Feedback regarding the Churchill development was, as to be expected, mixed. Not totally dominated by those who oppose our plans to regenerate the park. The feedback on our new entrance was, in contrast, overwhelmingly in favour of the plans, praising the design, thoroughness and quality of the visual elements. The major concerns were over access across a busy junction, but we will address this with Suffolk County Council Highways, ensure that safe crossings from the town will be provided. There were some useful suggestions for further improvements, and conversations with skate park users were also very informative. I just want to note one particular comment we received, that some of the more vocal groups in the press do not speak for all of Sudbury and Cornard. We shouldn't lose sight of that when assessing, particularly what is said online and the tone that is used by contributors there. Which brings me on to my next item. I would like to spend a few minutes reflecting on the tragic murder of Sir David Amos, following 5 years on from that of Joe Cox, and some of the subsequent commentary regarding the increasing lack of tolerance and coarsening of the political climate that we are experiencing now, primarily resulting from the lawless domain that social media has become. As the Daily Mirror recently commented, there is an ugliness infecting public discourse. This is more than the lazy, destructive cynicism about politics that arguably has been growing for a few decades and which is fueled by entertainers out for a cheap laugh. We are increasingly living in an Orwellian world where facts are regarded as lies and lies are accepted as facts. The anti-vax campaigns are just the latest sinister manifestation of this. We're having to cope with an environment in which politicians are being disbelieved, vilified and abused to an extent where we are almost regarded as being subhuman, and therefore threats and attacks can be justified. Female politicians fare even worse with the additional vile misogyny that they receive. This applies to all levels of democracy, and councillors up and down the country are experiencing similar abuse to MPs. This is a real threat to representative democracy, because those who would wish to stand will increasingly decide that the cost is too great. If there is a lack of candidates, if there is contempt for the system and the system fails, then there will be a vacuum. And that vacuum will be filled with something very ugly indeed. Clearly, there is a lot for police and the social media companies to do to stop this and prosecute offenders vigorously. At the moment, they are all failing dismally. However, there is also a role for councillors to play too. We must challenge inappropriate comments from our residents and get them to understand what is and is not acceptable. But councillors at every tier of local government must also be very careful what we say in public, taking particular care about what we say about each other and other authorities, mindful of how careless words can inflame the mob. I won't say any more, and I won't go into specific events in Babergh, which I'm sure you will realise are at the back or indeed front of my mind. But please, let's all make every effort to help our residents engage in robust, lively but mature debate without rancour. And as for those who do not wish for this, well, they must be shunned, and we must not give them any support or encouragement. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. I'd now like to... Sorry.
Mr. Chairman,
Councillor Beer.
is it possible to have a printed copy of that statement? Because it was difficult to follow it because it kept going in and out, which I can understand. But Cornard was mentioned in other places, and I'd like to take my time and go through it. So could I possibly have a printed copy?
Yes,
Thank you.
That is agreed. Thank you. I'd like now to turn to item 5, to receive notifications of petitions in accordance with the council procedure rules. John.
Thank you, Chair. Please be advised that we have received the following validated petition: 233 valid signatures regarding planning application DC/21/03644 in Ballingdon, Sudbury. This petition will be dealt with through the usual planning processes. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Item 6, questions by the public in accordance with council procedure rules. I would very much like to welcome Thomas Morelli to this meeting. Mr. Morelli, please can you ask your question to Councillor Alistair McCraw, Cabinet Member for Customers, in the absence of Councillor Ward.
Thank you. So, Councillor McCraw, Councillor John Ward has on several recent occasions sought to draw a distinction between the physical presence of Babergh in Sudbury being referred to as an access point and as an advice centre, with the latter being something Babergh has apparently never run in any of its face-to-face locations. So can Councillor Ward, and in his absence Councillor McCraw, therefore please explain why the Babergh website referred to its location in Sudbury as the Sudbury Advice Centre until at least November of 2016?
Thank you very much for your question, Mr. Morelli. I answer with the words of Councillor Ward, but I'll paraphrase accordingly. The reason that Councillor Ward felt it was important to make the distinction between access and advice is that the customer services provision we offer is focused on providing face-to-face supported access to council services, and wherever possible resolving that inquiry at the first point of contact. The word access reflects similar language used across several different councils and best describes service provision offered. Councillor Ward appreciates the language may have changed since we looked at our wider public access strategy back in 2016 to recognise that there are other advice-led services, such as citizens' advice, where residents can access advice on a wide variety of topics, not just council-led services. It's important to acknowledge that our residents' needs change over time, and that many people wish to access our services in different ways, such as online or via telephone. However, we understand that some of our residents still prefer to contact us via face-to-face, which is why we offer several in-person services to allow them to do so. In addition to our access point at Sudbury Library, we've also resumed our pop-ups in Hadley and Shotley. At present, we are seeing approximately 10 people at the Sudbury access point per day, and that's since April. We have 2 officers based there, so this equates to 5 visits per officer per day, which we feel is sufficient coverage. I do have some statistics on the proportion of internet non-users, should you wish.
Thank you, Councillor McCraw. Mr. Morelli, have you a supplementary question? It must relate directly to your original question.
Yes, I do. I'll ask it to Councillor McCraw. I appreciate he might not be able to answer it, given he's not Councillor John Ward, but obviously if the answer needs to be provided outside of the meeting, that's fine. So, given that when the singular unified access point was present in the town hall, residents could go in and inquire about a town council service, a district council service, or a county council service. And given that this integration was something that Babergh has previously highlighted on its website, does Councillor Ward or Councillor McCraw agree that this has now been lost, and does he feel that this has had any negative effect on the residents of Sudbury?
Okay, if I may reply. In terms of the services and the access necessary for the services provided by the Town Council and those supplied by the District Council, they would in fact be different, and their requirements would be somewhat different. The 2 buildings, as it happens, are not very far apart, and it would be perfectly possible to make an access on the same day to both locations. I don't possess any figures for access to Sudbury Town Hall. That's not fundamentally our business. The nature of our contract with Sudbury Town Hall changed as circumstances have done. I did mention that we have made changes and continue to make changes in our access to services. We're trying to provide appropriate services for the ways in which customers contact us. I've mentioned the pop-up services in Shotley and Hadley, and we're hoping to offer places for people to gain self-service support. We also have a telephone point, which is in Sudbury. Customers can contact us on days we're not there. We also have an iPad available for anybody whilst Sudbury Library is open. Customers, again, can, not an expression I was going to use, self-service as they wish. We've also launched very recently our iPad lending scheme with the libraries so that customers can loan a Wi-Fi enabled tablet. It will cost them no extra money. It's all ready to use to help them access online services at home. And as I've said, the level of service we are receiving, 10 customers per day, 2 officers, 2 days a week, means 5 officers work per day, and we believe that is sufficient. Thank you.
Councillor McCraw, thank you, Mr. Morelli, for your question. I'd now like to move on to item 7, questions by councillors in accordance with council procedure rules. And Councillor Dawson, please would you ask your question to Councillor Busby, Cabinet Member for Assets and Investments.
To Councillor Busby, please could you provide a breakdown summary of the full annual running costs since vacating Corks Lane development 2017 up to the development date expected spring 2022, to include all the costs including maintenance, insurance, etc., the security. And for clarification, what were the original estimated costs for development of Corks Lane and the profits at 2017? And what are the recalculated development costs at spring 2022, do you think?
Your question. The total cost for repairs, maintenance and security at the former headquarters site in Hadley from 2017 to the end of this financial year are anticipated to be £500,000. This is against budgeted costs of £342,000. The original costs for development were anticipated to be £12.9 million, delivering a net receipt to the council of £865,000, with a total of £1.4 million being delivered back to the public purse, which includes the net receipt, loan interest paid to the councils from the growth company, taxes, planning and building control income. Full details of which are set out in the confidential council report from December 2018, which can be sent to you if you wish. The development costs are currently anticipated to be circa 13 million, with a similar level of return being anticipated, with a net receipt of 900,000. Whilst there have been delays with delivering this complex site, the works are currently being tendered, and we anticipate that work will start on site early next year.
Thank you, Councillor Busby. Can I just clarify position of sitting or standing? I'm quite happy that members sit if they so wish. Thank you. Councillor Dawson, have you a supplementary?
I have, yes. Well, taking into account the development costs, which have, please confirm, my understanding is building costs have significantly risen from 18 to 35% in the building industry, and that's right across the board. My concern now is our original estimate profit is now not a viable financial proposition for our stakeholders. And I believe that really you ought to confirm, perhaps if you're sure this comes back to the Cabinet, to be discussed and to reconsider that formal business case, particularly if you're saying the costs have gone up from 12.9 to 13 million, and that doesn't really marry up with price increases for all the items that will be required to develop this site. So will you consider or take it on that you will bring this back to ensure it comes back to Cabinet to consider the business case?
Thanks. I think this is a little premature. As I said, we're waiting for tenders to come in. They should be in this month. We have a growth meeting early December, at which time we will be in a much better position to understand what the costs and returns are likely to be. If the situation is as you suggest, then bringing it back to Cabinet may be an option. But let's not jump the gun. Let's wait and see what the tenders come in at.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Busby. I'd like to move on now to item 8, Overview and Scrutiny Committee update. I'd like to invite Councillor McLaren to provide her update, a verbal update, and questions will be on clarification of her verbal update. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, due to circumstances beyond my control, I'm afraid I've got to bring a verbal report to members tonight. So I wish to report on the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee that was held on the 20th of September 2021. 10 members representing both councils were present at this meeting. The following are the agenda items that were scrutinised and debated at the meeting. There was the annual review of joint homes and housing strategy and homelessness and rough sleeping reduction strategy 2019 to 2024. The Housing Needs and Standards Manager gave a presentation to members of the committee on the progress to date, the actions that are currently underway and the future action planned over the remaining 2.5 years of the strategy. Questions by members covered a wide range of subjects, ranging from rented garages, rough sleeper accommodation, internet availability, translators, repairs, and improved training for all councillors in relation to gypsy and traveller communities. Members raised questions in relation to the supply of affordable housing and was the council adequately meeting the needs of homeless people, rough sleepers and families requiring bed and breakfast accommodation, and had the pandemic influenced that demand. Queries by members whether the draft local plan had currently identified the numbers of affordable dwellings actually needed, especially during the past 18 months. We were reassured that the service had been flexible in responding to demand during that time. So it was resolved by unanimous vote that the content of the actions plan was noted and asked for further information on the day-to-day activities of the action plan. It was resolved by 7 votes to 2 that the homes and housing strategy and homeless and rough sleeping strategy be reviewed twice yearly. There were 2 information bulletins received by members of the committee, customer service update and antisocial behaviour, and these bulletins can be found in the committee agenda papers. There were questions to seek clarification of some of the details in the papers, after which each of the information bulletins were noted. Members need to be advised that the October Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee was cancelled, as the proposed work plan was to scope the relationship between Cabinet and the committee and how that can be enhanced with regular dialogue. Unfortunately, this was not possible due to the possible changes taking place within Babergh District Council Cabinet, and the monitoring officer felt it would be inappropriate at this time to continue with this exercise. That concludes my report, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McLaren. Are there any questions for Councillor McLaren? Councillor Beer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question to the Chairman, was this a joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting?
It was, yes, it was.
And who chaired it?
Councillor Wellham from Mid-Suffolk.
And the third point to my question then, are you saying that we're going to dispense with this from the next meeting, that we're not going to have a joint, any more joint?
No, I don't think I said that, actually.
I didn't quite understand what you said at the end of your comments regarding that.
At the end of the final paragraph that I read?
Yeah,
Okay,
you referred to
shall
the
I
next meeting. Yeah, thank you.
Shall I reread that for you, Councillor Beer? Okay. Okay. Members need to be advised that the October Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee was cancelled, as the proposed work plan was to scope the relationship between Cabinet and the committee and how that can be enhanced with regular dialogue. Unfortunately, this was not possible due to the changes taking place within the Babergh District Council Cabinet, and the monitoring officer felt it would be inappropriate this time to continue that exercise.
Apologies, Mr. Chairman, to the Chairman. I'd forgotten we're in November.
Thank you.
Makes sense.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Then I'd like to move forward to the next item, which is recommendations from Cabinet and committees, and 9A BC 2121 Gambling Act 2005 Statement of Principles 3-yearly adoption. And I would like to invite Councillor Arthey, Deputy Leader of the Council, to introduce paper BC 2121 and to move the recommendation in the report, which is 3.1, that the draft revision Gambling Act 2005 Statement of Principles document as attached as Appendix A to this report be adopted for publication and to take effect for 3 years unless sooner revised from 31st of January 2022. Councillor Arthey.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, in the absence of Councillors Maybury, who's the Chairman of the Committee, and Carpendale, who's the Vice Chairman, and no leader here to step into cover, I'm afraid I'm the fourth choice. Thank you. The purpose of this report is to ask Council to adopt the amended Statement of Principles as recommended by Babergh Licensing and Regulatory Committee at its meeting on the 15th of October 2021. It is a statutory requirement to review and re-adopt the Council's gambling policy every 3 years. The decision to adopt the Statement of Principles may only be taken by Council and cannot be delegated to the Licensing and Regulatory Committee. A consultation exercise was undertaken for a 28-day period with 1 response received and that response was from Gamble Aware purely to advise of their service. All changes to the policy are contained within Appendix B. The majority of amendments were purely administrative, with a few changes that were as a result of the amendments to the Gambling Commission's guidance. The recommendation has been read out by the Chairman. I would say that, as you can probably guess, I'm not best placed to answer any questions, but we do have Emma Richbell with us and also Licensing Officer Catherine Green. If you have any questions, I'm sure she will be able to answer them. Chairman, I propose the recommendation and thank you.
Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Barrett, thank you.
I wish to second that. Thank you.
All right, I shall now move to questions. Councillor Lindsay.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose an amendment, please, to this. And that is that this council resolves not to issue casino premises licences. That's under section 166, subsection 1 of the Gambling Act 2005. And this resolution applies from today's date.
Have I a seconder? Thank you.
If I can just come in.
Sorry?
If I can just come in.
Yes. Can I just ask our Chief Exec to come in here, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to clarify a point with the officer who's with us, Catherine Green. My understanding, but please do correct me if I'm wrong, that if we were to introduce that change, there would need to be an additional consultation exercise before the council could do that. I'm not saying the council can't do that, but it would need to go through a consultation exercise to do that. Is that correct, or have I got the wrong end of the stick, which is perfectly possible?
That is correct, yes.
So, Chairman, just looking at Councillor Lindsay, if you wanted to, you could bring that back as another item, or you could make an amendment that makes that an additional consultation item, so effectively adopt the statement of principles that you have in front of you tonight, but in addition, then carry out that further consultation, because the other aspect, and again, I'm going to look at the relevant officer, is that you need to adopt the statement of principles before the close of this calendar year. And obviously, if you delay the implementation of this and carry out an additional consultation, you haven't got a full council meeting to adopt those principles in, you'll run out of time. So if I can, looking at Councillor Lindsay, if it's something that he and the council are in support of as a principle, then I would suggest that's a second motion that's dealt with alongside but separate to the gambling principles. And then we can always bring back the gambling principles early in the new year, rather than delay the implementation of what you have in front of you tonight. And hopefully that makes sense, but if it doesn't, please do ask.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm just looking at the Act and that particular subsection that I was talking about, and it does say an order under, well, mind you, it says an order under subsection 7 may require the licensing authority to consult such persons or classes of persons as they think are likely to be affected by the resolution. But the word there is may require. I don't know, but I'm open to advice, but I just wanted to interrogate that a bit further, because that reads to me as though it's not compulsory.
Thank you. On advisors team, we were given this option that we had to reconsult fully to prevent any judicial review, opening the council up to judicial review by not fully reconsulting.
Yeah, it's a question for Catherine, I think. We have not passed a no casino resolution, which we could have done. Was it 2005 that came in? So how many casinos have we got as a result of not having a no casino resolution?
We are currently unable to apply for a casino. There are none left under the Gambling Act 2005, I'm afraid, at present. So.
Councillor Beer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a member of that committee, I did bring up about the casino licence, and we were assured that there was none in Babergh, none in the pipeline, and we felt that it wasn't necessary to go down that road at this present time. So I'm not saying that what Councillor Lindsay is asking for isn't right or wrong, but that is really separate to all this. We need to accept this so that we can move forward. And then if the casino licence raises its ugly head, we can then sort that out in due course. Thank you.
Councillor Dawson.
Yes, would Councillor Lindsay mind clarifying exactly in subsection 7 what you were referring to? Sorry.
So, have you got the, you need to get the Act in front of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then section 166, resolution not to issue casino licences.
Sorry, what page is that on exactly?
I don't know, I'm looking at it on a web form, so it's just section, I looked up section 166. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to make a point of order as well. Go on.
If the papers, I apologise, if the papers are not available to us, how are members supposed to make a judgment on this? And a second question for clarification, would this be along the same lines of the motion that was recently passed through Suffolk District Council? And although I can appreciate people might want uniformity, we are different sovereign bodies, but I don't think I can happily vote, and I don't think we can happily discuss an item for which we don't have full information from officers presented within the report.
Make a point of order on all this. Sorry, Chair, if that's all right. Could I just explain what the background to this, and it might help. And then there's no point in having a debate on the rights and wrongs of it, because either we can do it or we can't. We need a consultation, and it sounds like we do. But the background is that Mid-Suffolk are now an authority that does not issue casino licences. And the reason for that is because they there's much talk that there might well be one in the pipeline, and they had one earlier that I don't know all the background, but some time ago it was threatened. And I mean, whether or not there's any casinos now, of course there aren't any casinos in Babergh now. That's not to say someone will come along in the future, particularly if Mid-Suffolk are ruling it out. You know, the casino operator will then go to, well, we'll try Sudbury then, or Hadley, or the edge of Ipswich. That's the reason I've raised it.
Come in here, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I just thought I'd come in. Helpfully, much like Councillor Ward not being present, our monitoring officer can't be present for sickness reasons, but is watching and able to advise us. So alongside myself and John Snell, you have also got the monitoring officer in the ether, able to provide advice. What she's saying is that it is perfectly possible to bring forward this issue. It's a discussion full council can have. Technically, though, it is not an amendment to this motion, because it's an additional thing. It's very similar, but it's a completely different thing, not an amendment to the motion you have in front of you. So if it's something that council would like to proceed with, much as Councillor McCraw mentioned, then through our officers we can bring a report back and you can consider it as a standalone issue if you wish to. Although I would echo the point that was made, Mid-Suffolk did go down that route, largely connected back to the Snoasis application as it was known several years ago. There isn't going to be a casino on that site. Mid-Suffolk narrowly decided to retain its no casino motion. That's something they are now obliged to look at on a regular basis as a result. You get into lots of double negatives. I would suggest that given that there is zero opportunity for you to have a casino at the moment, not because of your desires, because there are no licences from government, that it's possibly an unnecessary step. But as I said, if it's something that this council wants to consider, we'll take that on advisement, take that away, Chairman, and officers can prepare the report and obviously give a chance for the licensing committee to consider that first so that the licensing committee can put forward recommendations to you. But I am conscious you've got a mover and a seconder, so you do need to, having had a mover and seconder, unless Councillor Lindsay is happy to withdraw his suggestion. Actually, I'm going to contradict myself. You've got a mover and seconder for an amendment that you can't have. So actually it can't be an amendment. So in that sense, Chairman, you're able to simply move on. But if Councillor Lindsay can indicate that if you'd like us to bring that report back as officers, then we're more than happy to do so, as I say, through the Licensing Committee.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, these matters are particularly complicated, and rules and regulations that come down from central government are never made to be easy. They're almost designed to make lawyers profitable, finding their way around them. But can we, as this is going to come back to us, when it does come back, can we know, one, where there are existing casinos within striking distance, if you like, of us? Because it's no good us putting up a Chinese wall around Babergh if there's one just over the river in Colchester, or somewhere like that. And two, is it likely that the government are going to increase the number of licences for casinos to happen? That's something we need to know with the report when it comes back.
I'll ask our Chief Exec that one.
Yes, that's no problem at all. And I think another councillor made the point already. You don't have the full detail in front of you for this item tonight, which makes it difficult for you to debate it. Absolutely, we can make sure, Councillor Hinton, that the report that comes through covers both of those aspects.
And if I could just come back just for a moment and say, well, following on from that, the document we've got in front of us, does it differ significantly from those of our adjacent councils? Because if it does, there's a problem. If it doesn't, then there isn't a problem.
Catherine Green may want to come in as the licensing officer, but I'll simply add, no, it won't differ from many other councils anywhere in the country, because you are so guided by the legislation around this, there isn't a lot of scope for deviation anyway.
I would agree with that. There isn't really much scope for deviation. The only deviation would be if you were to adopt the no casino resolution.
Councillor McCraw.
I'd just like to make a point of clarification. Listening to both Catherine as the officer and Arthur as the chief executive, there is zero possibility of a casino, because no casino licence has been granted by government, nor is it likely to. So this becomes somewhat academic, and I suggest we move to the vote on the paper presented before us. The other item could be brought back to council at a later point, but I believe that would be a separate motion, and I'm not sure whether it would require to be a motion on notice as opposed to a motion without notice. But I believe this is a motion without notice.
Yes, just to clarify that point, absolutely it'd be a motion on notice, and of course it would come with an accompanying report which would make it a motion on notice. Just for clarification in terms of moving to the vote, obviously you can move that as a motion without notice.
I would like to move that.
However, I'm conscious that you haven't actually had any questions and debate on the paper in front of you, so you might want to do that first, unless there aren't any, and then by all means you can move to the vote.
Councillor Lindsay and then Councillor Hinton.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to have a chance to come back on everything that's been discussed and say, you know, as far as I'm concerned, that's fine. I understand it's been ruled out constitutionally because it's not an amendment technically, and that's the end of that. But just to clarify, you said something about this has got to be approved by a certain time, and but this can be approved anyway, and today or otherwise, and I can bring forward an amendment at the next meeting, which is, when is the next meeting? Separate motion. Separate motion. Yeah.
So to help clarify, yes, so and apologies because I'm cutting across Catherine Green, but yes, you are obliged to review your policy every 3 years. Now is the time to do that because that 3-year expires at the end of this calendar year. But that doesn't preclude you looking at the gambling policy every month if you really, I'm not suggesting you do, but looking at it every month if you really wish to. So approving this today doesn't preclude you from looking at it again in January, for example, and similarly doesn't preclude you from looking at the no casino aspect. That would have to come through, as was said, as a motion on notice, which therefore would mean it would come with a report, but it would go through licensing committee first, so that full council is advised by the licensing committee rather than coming straight here, because you delegate that function to the licensing committee, who are adept and used to looking at these issues in detail on your collective behalf.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think, well, I made an answer to the question about it. As far as the debate on this item is concerned, I'm quite happy with it, having asked a question about whether it differed from anybody else, and I don't think really there's any need for us to go into any more detail on this, as there is little scope for us to have variance on it. The one bit of scope, as Councillor Lindsay has brought up, we can't do anything about tonight, so we might as well go to a vote.
Can I just take that as a seconder for my motion to move to the matter in hand? That's all. Would that be a seconding? Thank you, Councillor Hinton.
Well, I was just going to second it, but that's fine. I'm very pleased it's done. And also, you've answered the Chief Executive's answered all my questions, and Councillor Lindsay needs to put it in a motion or bring it back at a later date. That's entirely up to him, but that can't be dictated by tonight's meeting. So I'm happy to go to the vote.
Gambling Act. Thank you. Councillor, Governance Officer Henriette.
Thank you, Chair. The vote is now in progress on your app. If you scroll down to the blue line, thank you. Councillor Beer, may I take your vote, please? Thank you. And Councillor Newman? Thank you. Thank you, Chair. That is 17 votes for and 2 abstentions. Votes carried.
Thank you. Can I now move on to item 10, presentation regarding the COVID response and recovery. Once again, I'd like to invite Councillor Hartley to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this time I'm second choice. This is in Councillor Ward's absence, and he's asked me to briefly introduce the item. As you heard him say earlier in his video, he is, as Council and Chairman of Cabinet, keen to increase debate and discussion for all councillors at full council meetings. This is just one way to involve us all in more of the strategic business of the council and the issues facing our residents and businesses. The purpose of this item is to consider the current status of the district's COVID recovery. At the leader's request, officers have prepared a series of slides to help set the background for our current COVID recovery position and prompt discussion between us. After the presentation, councillors will of course be able to ask officers any questions of clarification, but more importantly, we will have the opportunity to comment and debate the topic. This will be shared with the senior leadership team to help support and inform them in any operational matters and in partnership discussions with other organisations. The comments and discussions will also help inform Cabinet's thinking and decisions as they may arise to ensure our district, our communities and our residents are able to recover and thrive. I'm also sure that our debate and discussion here tonight will help inform the development of the Council's budget for next year, which will of course come to overview and scrutiny and then on to full Council in February 2022. I'll hand over to Cathy Nixon, who alongside Fiona Duhamel, Nadeem Matuja and Gavin Fisk will give their presentation. The presentation will be on the screens in the chamber tonight, but it has also been circulated to you by email so you can view it on your laptops if you prefer. And I ought to add, just at the end, Chairman, thank you, any questions again, not through me. Thank you.
Good evening, members. This evening, myself and my colleagues will focus on 4 key areas related to COVID recovery. I'll provide a broad overview, then Fiona will discuss the local economic recovery. Nadeem Murtuja, who is our new Interim Assistant Director, will focus on communities and well-being, and Gavin Fisk will reflect on the recovery in terms of housing and homelessness. And we suggest that we take questions at the end before you move into debate. I want to begin by acknowledging the broader Suffolk context for recovery. I think we would all agree that we've seen the statutory and voluntary sector partners across Suffolk working together at their very best during the response to the pandemic. Home But Not Alone, the Everyone In project on homelessness, to mention but 2. As we move into recovery, we now want to build on that strong system-wide collaborative working. And you will see on the slide before you the framework that Suffolk public sector leaders across local government, police, health and the local enterprise partnership will work to as we plan with them the longer-term recovery strategy that will take us to a better Suffolk. Essentially, they have agreed that their existing broad strategic priorities for Suffolk, set before the pandemic, are still very relevant to recovery. However, they've picked out a few for greater emphasis. These are health inequalities and supporting individuals to improve their physical and mental health and well-being, locally led action to reimagine town centres, housing and homelessness, enabling young people so impacted by COVID to fulfil their potential, and also environment and tackling climate change. COVID-19 has exacerbated some of the inequalities we were already aware of and also introduced new ones. And our commitment to reducing these inequalities remains the same, but we need to adapt our pre-COVID approaches in the light of the changes we have experienced, and also to support our communities and ourselves to move to a new normality. Before I come on to talk about our Babergh recovery priorities, I want to highlight some of the COVID impacts that we have seen in Babergh. We have seen some of the highest rises in universal credit claimants. We've also seen increases in unemployment, particularly for younger people, that's under 35, and for the over 50s. We have seen median earnings fall by 4.1% compared to 0.4% nationally, meaning that the median pay gap between England and Suffolk has got worse, having increased to £51 per week. We've also seen domestic abuse rise by 9.6%. We've seen antisocial behaviour rise by more than 18%. We've also seen the number of housing register applicants in bands A and B risen by more than 150%. We have seen mental health referrals across all ages increasing, and referrals into the range of agencies that deal with that are particularly high. I also just want to spend a moment on what we have seen in terms of our customer and resident contact. Our calls have gone up by about a third if we compare April to September 2021 to the same period last year. And while phone contact remains highest as the means of contact in the council, online contact is now fast catching up. Nearly 70,000 transactions or inquiries online have taken place since April of this year. Face-to-face contact has actually reduced And on average, we're now getting about 87 face-to-face contacts per month. We absolutely expect that there will always be people who need some face-to-face contact, and we want to definitely provide that for those most complex cases and vulnerable groups. But our communities in their behaviour are clearly telling us that they want us to do more online. And so now to some of our key COVID-related risks and concerns. What are they? The end of the uplift of universal credit is clearly a concern, as is furlough ending. Of course, we'll all be very aware of the current increase in Suffolk COVID cases and the challenge around the rollout of the booster and child vaccinations. Of course, there's always that risk of entering the national Plan B. We hope it won't come, but we need to plan for it in case it does. We've also got inflation pressures, we've got normal winter pressures, we have possible housing evictions, and the number of job vacancies and impact on specific sectors. In terms of operational recovery, one of our biggest challenges is in building services, where due to lockdown restrictions, non-emergency repairs had to be put on hold, and our backlog has now risen to over 3,000 cases. But we're also very aware of the need to prepare well for what could be a challenging winter, to minimise disruption both for us as an organisation and for our communities. So to that end, we are currently reviewing our risks and mitigation plans related to what the cumulative impact could be of further potential COVID disruption, of bad weather, and also other winter-related pressures, such as non-COVID-related staff sickness, greater pressure on disabled facilities grants to keep people out of hospital, increased homelessness, as well as some of the issues we've seen around things like HGV drivers. But amid all the challenges of recovery, there are, of course, opportunities. Opportunities for more innovation and technology through increased online activities, but also our technical businesses have seen growth, and we expect that to continue. Also, there are those opportunities of people's increased awareness of health and also of the benefits of activities. But of course, there is that increased awareness and determination for partners to work even more closely together than we have seen so far. And so, to round up, taking all this into account, we believe that our key strategic recovery priorities in Babergh to date should actually reflect our 6 key strategic priorities set before the pandemic, because they are still very relevant indeed to the issues that I've just highlighted. But in terms of our emphasis, we will focus on economic recovery, accelerating the customer and digital programme, playing our part to support good physical and mental health, harnessing the community capacity and volunteering that we saw during the pandemic, supporting voluntary and community sector agencies to recover and expand, housing and homelessness, and ensuring that people have a stable and affordable home, building on the reduced impact on the environment that we saw during COVID, and of course, the future office and agile working. But we need to keep all these priorities under review as we learn to live with and emerge from COVID, and as we continue to understand better the needs of our communities and businesses. And so now I'm going to hand over to Fiona Duhamel, who will talk to us about economic recovery. Thank you.
Could I ask a question, Mr. Chairman, at this point? I mean, the officer has just painted a very black picture, totally different to what the national government is telling us. And I've got quite a few questions that I'd like to put to her on those points. Well, you know, the point is that this has come out first and we've got to wait to put our questions, and really we're not responding to it at the appropriate times. I mean, it's quite depressing sitting here listening to this. Thank you.
Sorry. Chairman, if I can just jump in at this point. So absolutely fine to ask questions, of course, but the main point of this is to provide an opportunity for councillors to debate with one another. So, Councillor Beer, if you disagree with what any of the officers are saying, that's fantastic. Rather than challenging the officer, I think have that conversation amongst yourselves. That's the most important.
Yeah, but we've got a one-sided view here, Mr. Chairman. We can't challenge that at this moment, and I'd like to. On one particular point, you know, housing repairs gone up to 3,500. That's disgraceful. We should be getting on top of that. We should also be encouraging people to get back to the offices and work and what have you. You know, face-to-face. The public out there do want face-to-face meetings and getting back to some sort of normality. I understand that we have to do things online. I accept that. But, you know, you're making it sound as though, you know, all this is bad. Increase in antisocial behaviour. Well, I've been telling you that for years now. You should be getting your act together on that. I'm sorry, it's very disappointing.
So Chairman, if I can, I think Councillor Beer is absolutely making the point I was trying to make, which is this is the opportunity for councillors to challenge what they're hearing, but with each other. I'd also make the point that all of you are part of the council, so this isn't officers telling you one thing necessarily for you to disagree with in terms of you should be getting your act. This is about what councillors want us to prioritise collectively. So if I can, I would repeat the ask that challenge comes at the end, because I'm conscious otherwise there are a series of presentations, there's 3 more to come to. You may never get to the end of the presentations if we start to take questions and debate at this point. And particularly, I know Councillor Beer raised the issue, for example, of housing. You're going to hear more about that from Gavin Fisk, for example. So if I can beg councillors...
I hear it from the residents, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, if I can beg the councillors' patience, we'll get through the presentations as quickly as we can, and then there'll be plenty of opportunity to debate the things in the round.
Councillor McCraw.
I'm sorry to ask this, but it was mentioned that this had been circulated. I've looked through my emails. I can't find the email concerned, and I wondered if that perhaps might be best sent round again during the presentation.
Thank you. Yes, we are actually working on the problem as we speak. It is a very large file, and we have had some issues trying to send it all afternoon, so we might have to send it to you at 2 emails, but we are working on it as we speak.
In that case, it may be that we need to return to the presentation at a later point.
Thank you. Yes, if we could please have our presentation completed. I think that will answer a lot of our debate for each other. Thank you. With each other. Fiona.
Good evening, councillors. I'm going to be talking about the economic recovery. And I want to start by saying, actually, Arthur, if you could move us on a slide. Yeah, I'm not actually going to start with what's there. I'm just going to give you a few stats, which hopefully are, well, they're very positive, I think, in terms of the amount of support our businesses have had over the pandemic period. So individual grant payments to businesses have been around 2,477. That's a total grants paid to our businesses of over £42 million to support their resilience during the pandemic. They are a mix of discretionary and mandatory grants. The discretionary grants we called something called Back to Business, and we've paid 42 of those grants, which totals around £688,000 to Babergh businesses. And just the slide that you have up here is really around the split of the type of businesses that the Back to Business grant has been paid out to. Apologies, it's quite difficult to see on this screen, but the sort of brown area is hospitality type businesses, and that's the largest area of payment. The yellow area is events and events hospitality, so quite an interesting split, and hopefully when you get the slides you'll be able to look at that in a bit more detail. but it shows that the sectors that we've been most supporting through the grant payments, which is very much around our visitor economy, hospitality, and there's a section on retail as well. If you could move us on, please. So I'm not going to dwell too much on this slide. This is really putting the context of the work we've been doing in a more national picture. Talking about obviously some of the government recovery plans, which are emerging all the time, the regional plans around the Local Enterprise Partnership renewal plans. Suffolk Growth Programme Board are also working on a visitor economy recovery plan, and coming right down to the work that we've been doing here in Babergh around our own recovery proposals. And that includes refreshing our economic evidence base, refreshing our workspace evidence that we've gathered, and looking at the work we're doing around, for example, Freeport, which whilst it isn't in this district, will undoubtedly, in terms of number of jobs created, impact our district positively. Thanks, Arthur. So why do we need a recovery plan for the economy? Well, it's quite important, really, because it helps us as officers and as you as councillors to help give direction to our businesses as we start to move out of the pandemic. It also helps us to divert resources where they're most needed. And it also helps us to understand whether our priorities are different now to where they were before the pandemic. And Kathy's already mentioned some things that have changed, or some things that have grown in importance, and it's helping to understand some of that, in particular digital infrastructure with people working from home, etc. Whether we see that being a long-term thing or whether we see that being something for the moment, it is still needed. And it a recovery plan will help us to drive conversations with our partners, particularly around funding. So before the pandemic, just before the pandemic, we did a new economic evidence base. It was a 120-page document, and it didn't go any further than developing a new framework, which was around three key themes: innovation and creativity, being connected and sustainable, and skilled and successful. And we've carried those themes through into the recovery proposals. So we have, sorry if you can move us on, we have drafted a recovery plan. It's out with our stakeholders at the moment, so people like the Suffolk Chamber, some of our business organisations. We're asking them for comments, and they're feeding comments back, which is great. But it effectively falls into three strands. There's a react phase, which is kind of the phase we've been in. We're still in a little bit, because we're still spending some government funding, like the Welcome Back Fund. So it is about still bolstering resilience, but it's very much now looking towards recovery, and in particular around regrowth. How can we help those businesses get back to where they were and start to grow? So I thought it'd be helpful if I just gave you a few examples of some of the good work that's been going on and the work that's really helping our businesses. So sticking with those three themes around connected and sustainable, we obviously appointed some time ago now a sustainable travel officer who's been working with a number of our councillors and inviting lots of comments from our communities on sustainable travel, and in particular walking and cycling. We held I think it was mentioned at the beginning, we held a local energy showcase last week or the week before, I've lost track. We had over 220 businesses and individuals that attended that, and it was a really, really successful event. It didn't cost the council anything. We managed to get sponsors to sponsor the whole event, but it really helped our communities and our businesses understand more about local energy. And why is that important to the economy? Because it's a very fast-growing sector. It's where the future jobs and the future skills, the future jobs will come from, and where future skills are going to be needed. It's a really, really key and very fast-growing sector. We've been working on active travel schemes, which has included things like new cycle parking in Sudbury and in Hadley. And we're working very much with partners around rollout plans for high-speed broadband. And I'm talking about 1 gigabit upload-download speeds for anybody that's particularly techie here. And something that's becoming, is going to be very obvious soon, is about new solar carports in our town centres. So the one in Sudbury that we're talking about, which is being funded through some external funding that we secured, and hopefully will come forward as a great project for our town centre. You could. Next one. Thank you. We, in 2020, November 2020, in the heart of the pandemic, we launched an Innovation Awards for our businesses. Again, we had over 100 businesses involved, 11 categories, and some fabulous support from our sponsors for our small businesses came out of those awards, which is still going on today. And the businesses that won, and Ferguson's Deli in Hadley was delighted to be a winner, and I know they've been really pleased and following that through ever since. Those Innovation Awards have led us to set up an innovation board, which has some key stakeholders from across the region actually helping to support some of the work we're doing across Babergh. And that includes people like Tech East, who are big players in the east of England. We have also created an innovation network, which includes a monthly newsletter to our businesses. And just to be clear, innovation is not just about tech businesses. Any business can innovate. And one of the things about the Innovation Awards that was so great is that we celebrated small businesses who had tweaked their general business practices to either help with COVID or to help post-COVID. So it isn't just about technology businesses, it's widespread, and that's what we want to promote. We've secured funding for digital skills support for some of our very small businesses, particularly linked to another initiative which has been hugely successful, which is the Virtual High Street, giving our high street businesses an online presence. And again, we've secured funding. We started it in Sudbury, and we've secured funding to roll it out to Hadley. We've had I think we've got about 200 businesses currently on the Virtual High Street just for those two towns. We're looking now at how we can roll it out to the wider district, particularly through some of our bigger and smaller villages, because the good thing about the Virtual High Street is it is not limited just to town centres. It's really able, anywhere that has a property, a retail property, is able to be part of the Virtual High Street. We've created something called pop-up innovation hubs through something called Innovate Local that we came up with, and that's led to a market stall in Hadley being provided for free for a small business who wants to go and trial their business idea. It's been hugely successful. I think we're now fully booked up until the end of Christmas, so we'll be looking at what the follow-on is from that, and we're getting some great feedback and case studies from some of those businesses. And as I said earlier, we've refreshed our workspace study to have a look at what the impact actually is at the moment on some of our demand studies that we had around what businesses need in terms of premises. And the final area is around being skilled and successful. We've submitted bids, so we've submitted a bid to the Community Renewal Fund around Economies and Healthier Lives programme, very much in partnership with our communities team, looking at how we can really support people of any age actually to be healthier in their communities. And of course, how you work and where you work is part of that. We've worked strongly with Suffolk County Council around the Kickstart programme. I won't go into the detail of that, but if anyone wants more details, I can give it afterwards. And the Kickstart programmes have been very, very successful in providing employment for 16 to 24-year-olds. We're looking at new workspace based on that workspace study. So in Hadley, we are bringing forward proposals for 10 new workspace units. Again, that's what the demand study is telling us. And we've been working with the University of Essex around developing something called a Knowledge Transfer Light Partnership, which is based on providing benefits to very small businesses that they couldn't normally afford. And the Curiosity Festival, so my voice is going, we're planning for Easter 2022. Sorry, I just have some things here. We've been doing quite a lot of work on inclusive placemaking and partnerships, the work in our town centres. We've set up groups. We've also got in Sudbury a cultural subgroup now, which is, God, my voice is going, sorry. I'm talking too quickly, which is all about really bringing together partners to try to work together on joint projects and initiatives. I've talked about the Virtual High Street. Sorry, Arthur, if we go on. I won't really talk too much more about that, other than it has been a great and very well supported initiative by our businesses. And the final case study really is around the Local Energy Showcase event, which I mentioned earlier, which is the first that we've done. We've had recognition really across the East for it at the moment, and we're just taking feedback to see how we can make it better if we're looking to run it again next year. A very quick slide just about jobs, because actually all of this comes back to job numbers really in the end. Some of these schemes that are on the slide here are not necessarily in place yet, but they will deliver significant numbers of jobs. And then you've got other schemes that are already well underway, like Broughton, which of course is already delivering large amounts of jobs. But we've got some future sites coming forward, like Brantham, Chiltern Woods in Sudbury, and Worsted. There's a food enterprise zone there that we're really trying to now work with partners to bring forward those jobs. I'm glad this is the last slide, because I'm not sure my voice is going to hold out. And looking to the longer term, we're looking very much at creating a new economic strategy. We've redone the evidence base that we did 12 months ago because it feels out of date now. So we're very much looking at how we can write a new strategy which can build upon the recovery work that we're already doing, but start to look to the future a little bit more in terms of where the new jobs and how we can help to support new jobs. We're looking to develop an inward investment strategy. Inward investment isn't just about bringing new businesses to the district, it's about helping existing business. I think 75% of inward investment activity is around supporting existing businesses to grow. But we're very keen that we develop a bespoke strategy around how we can best do that. And we will continue to build those strong partnerships with local, regional and national partners, especially around funding. We are looking potentially at doing another set of innovation awards in 2022, and I think the support and feedback we've had already around the local energy showcase event is potentially around doing another one of those in 2022. And we will continue to support businesses across the district to ever-changing circumstances, really. But it's not all a negative picture. We've really had some significant activity going on alongside a major grants programme, and hopefully it's given you a good taste of that tonight. Thank you. Oh, I think I'm handing over to Nadine to talk about communities.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nadine Matuja. I've met some of you, I haven't met some of you, so hopefully I'll be able to have some of those meetings. I'm just going to talk to you about communities. Both of my colleagues have spoken about a system-wide response, and it's also important that within the organisation you get a flavour of what we've been doing actually across service areas in terms of responding to COVID. I'm going to pick up on about 4 or 5 areas. I want to talk about leisure services. I'm going to talk about a broad range of interventions that we've been applying in terms of supporting communities to recover. And I'm also going to talk about how we're moving forward on a system-wide level in relation to responding to some of the challenges that Cathy was actually referring to, particularly in terms of the impact of COVID. So, beginning with leisure services. Leisure services right across the country, there's been quite a significant impact as a result of COVID. You know, we have seen some leisure services, and particularly the districts, talk about the potential impact in relation to being sustainable in the longer term. We've also identified that leisure services, alongside the LG, have actually lobbied government in relation to support in terms of recovery, and some of you will remember in December 2020, government actually listened to that call and identified a rescue package particularly for leisure services. It's important that when we think about leisure services, we think about leisure services in a number of contexts. One of those contexts is how leisure services can actually provide a real value in terms of supporting people to recover, both from a physical and a mental health and well-being perspective. But equally, leisure services, the work that we've done in relation to decarbonisation, really help us in terms of delivering some of our sustainability aspirations. It's also important to recognise that the work that we invest now in terms of leisure, and particularly in terms of engaging communities and those individuals who are actually most at risk, that not only does it actually benefit those individuals and families in terms of their own physical and mental health, but it also in the longer term reduces pressure in relation to the NHS and adult social care as well. So where are we in terms of leisure services locally? Well, so you can see from this slide, in spite of the national picture in terms of leisure, we've recovered actually quite well. In terms of, so what you have there is health and fitness membership on your first slide. You'll identify we're now actually at close to pre-pandemic levels. And then in terms of swim academy, exactly the same picture. What that goes to show is that what we've shown locally is some real leadership. And what it's also enabled us to actually understand is how the local authority has actually worked with its partners, particularly in this case Abbeycroft, to actually make sure that we're able to actually recover at pace. So whilst other places across the country have been actually struggling, here in Babergh we've actually been really bucking the trend and actually making sure that we're able to provide the support that our residents need. I'm just going to move on to the most recent survey from Sports England. I think there's and I just wanted to touch on that quote because I think, and I'd just like to park that because I'll come back to that a little bit later on. So what that quote really actually references, that the impact of COVID, so for example, if anyone's read the Marmot Review, has had a disproportionate impact, particularly in terms of deprived and more disadvantaged communities. And what the real emphasis and importance of that is, those same people will actually be the most at risk, and they're the ones that we need to support. But just in terms of activity, so this was a survey where we only got the results last week, and what it identifies, in terms of inactivity, there's been a 4.8% increase. In terms of people who are actually fairly active, it's around 1.9%, and those people who are actually active, we've actually seen a decrease. I'm going to move us on to our next slide. And so, focusing on investment in leisure services. So Hadley-Pool, we've refurbished and we've modernised. We've supported that by approximately £2.5 million of investment by the council, supplemented by a further 200k from the town council and £150,000 from Sports England. We've seen a £2.4 million extension and refurb of Kingfisher Leisure Centre, and as part of our aspiration in terms of decarbonisation, and it's what Fiona was really saying in terms of the 40-bay solar carport, which will soon be erected on the Sudbury site, which will then, combined with the battery storage, will feed into the leisure centre. So it's going to lead to actually reducing energy costs. So it's a real example how community services and the work that Fiona's been doing on a system-wide level actually benefiting, not just in terms of sustainability, but also in relation to leisure services and modernisation going forward. Some of you will remember that you received a presentation on the 2nd of September, and what that identified was a real comprehensive range of interventions. And what I'm going to do is not go through all of those interventions, but what I am going to do is actually just showcase and actually highlight some of the work that's been going on, and it'll really give you an insight and flavour of some of the recovery work that's been taking place. So the Active Schools programme, which aims to reduce obesity and inactivity in children, and it's been delivered in 8 locations across Babergh. Those were Acton, St Gregory, St Peters, Sudbury, Great Waldingfield, Woodall, Hadley, Beaumont, Bures, Woldsall and Popkin. The Active Wellbeing Project that supports older adults to stay active is currently running in Glemsford and Shotley, with plans to expand that further. And free school holiday swims for children and young people continue at our leisure centres. We're also looking at putting together a paper because we recognise, particularly in relation to people who want to actually, those people who can't swim, in relation to what that will look like right across the landscape. Just bear with me a second. In terms of the community grants programme, in 2021 we've provided community grants for about 107 projects with a total value of around £600,000. This included financial and other support for 48 community organisations that were directly providing community COVID response in their local communities. In addition, we administered 63 member locality grant awards totaling 47k, and at the end of September 2021, halfway through this financial year, £308,000 in community grants have been allocated to 45 projects. We've been working with partners to support community groups with advice and restart grants to enable them to get back up and running, almost back towards pre-pandemic levels. And you will not believe this, but my laptop has just... You can't because it's got... Can I just have your charger? Apologies. bear with me.
Chairman, just while Nadine's doing that, if councillors haven't spotted it, the slides have now gone out by email, so you should have them in your inbox for you to view them yourselves. I think, thanks to Robert, who's managed to compress them sufficiently to get them into an email.
It's not coming down. No, it's fine.
That's why.
Okay, whilst that comes on, and I wrote these notes, so I should be able to take you through them from memory.
Sorry, Chair, can I just make the point that it seems to be that there's a lot of information that we're getting here that we will also get in the next two reports. I don't want to hear it twice.
Yeah, got it. Yeah.
That's you, Derek.
Those pants. Yeah. Okay, sorry, I'm back on. Apologies, everybody. So, in terms, since May 2021, 9 sports clubs have been awarded combined total of 15k, and the Babergh allocation of community restart funding, and 18 community groups have been awarded a combined total of 21k. The grants application process has also been digitised. In terms of community safety, and just conscious of what my colleague Cathy had said, but also Councillor B in terms of antisocial behaviour. So we've reviewed the antisocial behaviour process, including the information sharing protocol. We've introduced a new case management system, and we've also looked at developing a new set of tools in terms of community triggers. CCTV is being enhanced right across the district, with a view that we will have 27 CCTV cameras installed. We're aiming to install a CCTV camera in Bellevue. We were hoping to do that this week. We've not been able to do that, but subject to weather, we hopefully will do that next week. And we're going to deliver that through a contract with West Suffolk Council. We've also agreed to lease a mobile CCTV camera fully dedicated to Babergh from West Suffolk Council. Reported incidents of domestic abuse have increased during the pandemic. That's a national picture. It's not just unique to Babergh. We've been involved in domestic abuse awareness campaigns. We've also secured funding for a dedicated domestic abuse officer in our Housing Solutions team. In addition to that, staff are being trained as domestic abuse champions in order to recognise the signs of domestic violence and being able to signpost for specialist support. In terms of social prescribing, building on the success of the social prescribing work that we've already taken in partnership with primary care, what we are aiming to do now is extend that further to youth prescribing, and we're working with partner agencies to agree a joint funding strategy, outcomes and priorities. We have a view in relation to youth prescribing that what we want to do is actually have one officer in each of the 5 INTs and potentially base the specialist in schools. We have 2 proactive INTs in Babergh, in Sudbury and South Rural, informed by, and both of those INTs their work is informed by a local public health needs assessment. This enables them to actually work with local communities in terms of addressing the broader and wider determinants of community health. In terms of wellbeing strategy, you'll note that you actually adopted a wellbeing strategy earlier in September, and that's to complement the sports and physical strategy as well. The plan next is to make sure that we actually have synergy between both of those strategies, and we will start working towards developing a delivery plan. I should say that this list is not exhaustive, but that broadly gives you a flavour of some of the work that's currently been underway. Some of the highlights that I just wanted to just touch on, which I'm sure you will be aware of. We've delivered the Women's Tour. We've been developing particular interventions and delivering interventions in terms of chill, chat and play. I've already spoken about integrated neighbourhood teams, which I'll touch on in a short while. And we've also extended the school holiday programme across 11 projects, which run right across the district. when Kathy was describing some of the challenges that we could potentially face, she identified some of those issues, whether they were related to inflation, whether they were related to antisocial behaviour, or the exacerbation of inequalities. And it's quite important that what we do as a council, we actually prepare for all scenarios. So what the better case, the worst case, but also recognising in some cases it's too early to say. And to understand what we mean by preparing for those scenarios, Arthur, you've taken 2 slides. Okay, one of the things, an area of work that we're focusing on is what we call population health management. Now, what we're going to try to identify within population health management is try to understand better some of the issues and the challenges that are facing our population. So it will enable us to actually determine some of the risks and challenges facing our communities. And in that context and in that regard, what we'll be able to do, identify particular insight in relation to where we need to actually focus our resources and our energies. That means thinking about the work that we've already done in relation to COVID, using insight-led, working with our communities. So really harnessing that support and when we're able to understand evidence and intelligence better, what we're also able to do is really segment and stratify exactly where we need to actually focus our resources. So that's about ensuring that we can focus on both place and actually people. That will enable us to give us the best chance in relation to making sure that those people who are potentially disproportionately impacted, we're able to actually target resources to meet those people's needs. And it's that targeted approach that we really need to actually focus on in relation to supporting people to recover the best what we can out of COVID. I'm now going to touch on these final 2 slides, which colleagues have already spoken about, which is around digital inclusion. So some of the challenges, some of the opportunities that we've identified, particularly in relation to digital inclusion. So we have 88% of residents which actually have access to digital internet. And what we've also identified, we've begun to see a real shift in digital participation between 2013 and 19 in terms of usage. In 2019, only 8.3% of the population of 16 plus were not able to use the internet. We also recognise in terms of digital inclusion, we need to actually understand better in relation to who is it in terms of those communities most at risk that we need to provide support. So in that context, marginalised groups or those communities which are actually on the periphery, and identifying what is it that we need to do in terms of what prevents digital access, but also in relation to what are the measures that we need to put in place. It's also important to note from a risk management perspective in terms of digital inclusion, Babergh actually reports far more positively compared to the wider county. A Lloyd survey indicates it's about much more than access, it's also about developing digital skills, which was some of the points that Fiona was actually referring to in her presentation. In a recent survey that we did with tenants, we identified that 54% of tenants were fairly or very confident in relation to internet users. What we now need to do is understand the thematic issues that that survey has identified and start thinking about the work that we need to do in terms of making sure that those tenants get the appropriate level of support, both in terms of gaining online skills, but also in relation to any other issues that that survey has identified. And finally, in relation to my final slide, our cover recovery in the digital space ranges from capacity building for those people who need it. It means that we've got to work on building a digital champion network, which will enable people to actually get some of that peer-to-peer support from one another, and a system that enables access to digital service, lending, rehoming, and obviously from that there's clear sustainability benefits. We have tapped into a digital inclusion network to understand better and ensure we are able to develop best practice locally. Through Councillor McCraw was referring to the work that we're doing in terms of libraries. So it's through our library provision we're making iPads available so people are not only able to access hardware, they can also become more proficient in developing their own online skills, which would then actually benefit engagement with councils, including accessing services and build confidence. Our website pages will be launched soon. This will help further develop the online offer and improve skills and confidence too. Our digital approach is to ensure that our residents are able to benefit from the wide range of priorities and outcomes that we want to achieve for the residents of Babergh, whether they're in economic, education, or accessing services. We want to make the customer journey when engaging with the council and the quality and responsiveness of our services as seamless as possible. I'm now going to hand you over to Gavin, who's going to talk to you about housing.
Thank you. Good evening, members. Just before I talk about some of the housing challenges on that slide, I just want to come back to some of the points raised earlier in the presentation in relation to the outstanding work or the work in progress as it's known. It's clear that there is a national challenge as a result of the lockdowns last year. We as a council would conduct typically about 12,000 repairs per year. With the national lockdowns, clearly we couldn't undertake that work, and clearly that has built up and has then been reported this year when residents have been able to do so. The average work in progress is around about 1,500 to 2,000 jobs at any one time. We're currently at approximately 3,500. Just in response in terms of some of the things that we're doing, we're utilising external contractors wherever possible. We're obviously clearly prioritising the work based on its importance and priority. We're giving opportunities for staff to work additional hours and support the efforts. We've recently introduced new scheduling software to allow us to be more efficient in our ability to get around the geographic area. We're actively managing material shortages with our supplier, Travis Perkins, and we're also maximising the retention and recruitment of the trades team to optimise it. And I think it's important to also just reflect on the past 18 months, because our repair service did not stop throughout the pandemic. They did not work from home. They were out there every day. Whilst they wouldn't have been carrying out routine repairs, they were carrying out urgent and emergency repairs. They were turning around void properties in order for us to let those to those in greatest need. They were cleaning all of our housing sites to prevent COVID in sheltered accommodation and reduce the risk. And of course there was the Leeds project in Sudbury, which has received recognition nationwide in terms of the speed at which that project was turned around, as well as offering mutual aid to equivalent organisations that were in need of support. So I think I'd like to take the opportunity to celebrate the work of the building services team during that time. If I come on to the slide in front of you, some of the housing challenges, clearly we've seen an increase in demand, whether that be for those in priority need, those in temporary accommodation and those rough sleeping, and that's been a trend that we've seen throughout the pandemic right up until now. And as we know, there will be a range of factors contributing to this, and it's important that we can demonstrate to you and to our residents that through our COVID recovery, our response to those in greatest need will be to mitigate the impact and the effects. So if you could just take me on to the next slide, Arthur. In terms of housing recovery, there has been significant funding made available to local authorities throughout the pandemic to manage the effects of everyone in. And I think we should celebrate the work that was done across the county last year in response to everyone in. 63 rough sleepers off the streets of Suffolk over 24 hours to prevent those from becoming ill or unwell. And at its height during the last year, we had more than 350 individuals or families in temporary accommodation across Suffolk. In response, I think the response in Suffolk has been really well received in terms of additional funding now to support the recovery efforts. And you may already be aware that Suffolk public sector leaders recently ring-fenced £1 million to aid to aid housing, homelessness and inequalities. Babergh have just been allocated £250,000 through the Household Support Fund, and that will support those with additional housing costs and prevent homelessness between now and March next year. Babergh have been awarded just this week £46,000 from the government support for vulnerable renters this winter. We're still intending to deliver 3 units of accommodation to support our rough sleeping work, and we've already begun the work to co-produce our next bids to the government in relation to rough sleeping. So they're all positive, but if we move on to some of the additional work that's been done by Babergh and Mid-Suffolk and Suffolk authorities, I think what the pandemic did in relation to housing inequalities and homelessness was really galvanise the work of authorities. And if I could just pick out on that slide, some of this didn't come down to money. Some of it came down to working differently in the way that we manage our business. So the introduction of a rough sleeper coordination database. Prior to the COVID pandemic, we obviously only had a limited knowledge of who was out there and who may be sleeping rough. And through the coordination database, we've now got all of the partner agencies working together to give us a really rounded, richer picture of the individual, their needs, the gaps in support, where they may be receiving support. And that work has really been developed, and I think is probably an exemplar, although it hasn't been highlighted beyond Suffolk authorities. But what it is now allowing us to do is identify trends, identify demand, and support those individuals, not just now, but in the longer term as well. If I move on to the next slide, we've got a number of priorities as Babergh Mid-Suffolk and as Suffolk authorities, and the first of those is no return to rough sleeping, as well as preventing homelessness. We know that a recent report by Lord Kerslake found that homelessness prevention is an aim which crisscrosses government departments, bringing with it social and financial returns. Research has shown that public spending would fall by 370 million if 40,000 people were prevented from experiencing 1 year of homelessness nationally. And the human and social costs of rough sleeping are extensive, and much of it is borne out in the health and criminal justice system and within our communities. And we know that analysis of public spending shows that if we can, on average, quickly resolve an episode of rough sleeping at a cost of approximately £1,500, it would rise to £20,000 if that individual was persistently rough sleeping for 12 months. If I take you on to the next priority, more homes and developing healthier lives, the reality is to resolve many of the challenges, we must prioritise prevention and create more housing capacity. For people to sustain a life away from the streets, what is required is a range of housing and accommodation options, along with wraparound support. And to pick out one of those examples in terms of what we're doing and what we need to do is the evidence around some of the innovative models to effectively prevent, reduce and resolve rough sleeping, and that's housing first. But in addition, the investment in employment support to give people the skills and opportunities back into work, along with the priorities that you can see in front of you. On the next slide, the third element that we are focused on is no evictions into homelessness. And the reality is that rather than tackle the symptom, we need to tackle the cause, and by doing so, avoid the extensive costs to the wider system. We know that the London School of Economics has estimated that the current predicted UK unemployment rate, 420,000 tenant households might be in arrears by the end of 2021. And we know that analysis by Joseph Rowntree Foundation has shown that as a result of the cuts to universal credit in September, that could result in nationally 500,000 people being swept into poverty. We're already actively monitoring the effects of the recent eviction ban ending, and Suffolk authorities are identifying trends and pinch points in the number of eviction notices being awarded and sharing best practice. The demand and supply of housing is, of course, not a local authority problem to resolve. There is a clear appetite from housing associations locally to help us and prevent homelessness and find secure homes for people who are homeless. And the National Alliance Homes for CAFE exists to encourage such housing associations to do more on this by asking its members to sign up to 9 homelessness commitments. And I'm pleased to say that in Suffolk, what we've seen is a real trend of local authorities working with registered providers over the past 18 months, with really a galvanising of agreeing guiding principles that local authorities and registered providers will follow to prevent evictions and the reliance on perhaps local authorities historically being responsible for reducing rent arrears or preventing evictions. And then if we move on to a better deal for everyone, and to sum up, central government directives last year and the funding to match really helped galvanise local agencies that I and colleagues work with a real common objective to saving lives. And this was led by greater strategic buy-in, liberating many from process and procedure, and perhaps often the deemed silo structures that perhaps we've worked in the past. What we've seen over the past 18 months is how stakeholders have formed joint working groups, shared best practice and provided oversight in terms of the response, meeting more regularly and discussing some of the challenges. And this increased sense of shared responsibility and impetus can only really see us act as agencies in a more collective and collaborative way, taking responsibility for clients and the situations that I've presented to you this evening. Thank you.
So, Chairman, if I can, that's the end of the presentation. Conscious we've given you a huge amount of presentation there, and thank you for your patience in terms of allowing us to take you through that. Unsurprisingly, you can imagine, having been addressing COVID for a 2-year period, that's why there's quite so much that's been done, but there's also still a lot to do. But as Councillor Arthey said right at the start, this really is an opportunity for you to now have those discussions yourselves to help inform the future direction of the councils around this topic, but also help inform the thinking around the budget for February as well. So I'll hand back to the Chairman in terms of debate and comment.
Point of order?
I do have a point of order, Chair, and I beg members' understanding of why I'm making this point. There are 37 slides there, a lot of content. If we are to debate and discuss all the content of all 37 of those slides, I don't see that we'll get to make any real progress. I think there is obviously discussion to be had about all those things, but I take the view that this is information being supplied to us as to being what the effects are. Now, we could argue about whether it's true or not in any number of ways, but effectively, that's what we're being told. These are the facts. How they are dealt with, well, we can see how some of those are being dealt with. So from that point of view, I'd like to suggest that carrying out a debate on the topics described in these voluminous slides, with more detail behind them, is probably pointless. Perhaps it can be dealt with at another time, and that's all I'm going to say. I hope that the Chair and the members will take account of that.
Thank you, Councillor McCraw.
I do have a seconder for that motion, if it was necessary, Chair.
Just to be clear, Councillor McCraw, I'm not sure I heard a motion. I think I know what you were saying.
A motion of it to say that we not discuss, that we accept this as a statement of fact, and I have a seconder sitting behind me.
That's the point. Yes. You can just have a show of hands if that's the motion.
Yeah. If that is the
Seconder here.
Seconder. Okay. If that is the feeling of members, please can I have a show of hands, please?
Mr. Chairman, there will be an opportunity for us to make comments on all this at a later date.
Oh, absolutely.
Well done. I agree.
The whole point, as I see it, is that our officers have produced something which some of our councillors might not be aware of, and therefore you know where we stand. Yeah, you are aware of it. But can I I'll just thank our officers for what they've done. It's excellent. Councillor Busby.
Thank you. Look, it's all well and good us just saying, yeah, that's all fantastic information and we'll take it on board. But I would have thought that the purpose of doing this was to ask us for some advice as to where they want to take it, where we want to go. Personally, I felt that I was expecting something different. I was expecting it to be COVID related rather than just general. I think it was 80% of that we
would expect to happen anyway. The 20% that was driven by COVID was lost, I'm afraid. And it will be difficult for us to just debate on, as you said, 37 slides. But if there's anything that you feel that we should take forward, you need a steer on, then I think that needs to come back to us as soon as possible.
If I can, Chairman. I'm conscious, I think there was a couple of hands. I think Councillor Ayres wants to come in as well. But I think what I'm hearing from Councillor McCraw's motion and what Councillor Busby just said is that the item effectively is deferred. If you want to come back for further consideration, that's fine. And outside of the meeting, if there are specific points that councillors either wish to question further or would like to clarify ahead of any debate at full council, then of course we can do that.
Yes, thank you. Excellent presentation. Thank you so much. Gavin, I won't name names, but I would like to compliment a certain gentleman who often walks the meadows and looks for the people who haven't got anywhere to sleep, and the staff that work behind the scenes. So pass on my thanks and congratulations, because I think they should be mentioned. Thank you.
Councillor McCraw.
Just to add that, can I suggest that the method of discussion amongst members be presented between members of the council by email? Perhaps the group leaders can get together and decide on what the most appropriate means of going through these 37 slides should be. It may not need to be in a full debate in a chamber, it may be through a briefing method, but I think we do need to do it.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Can I just have a show of hands then so we can move on to the next item? It's unanimous. Thank you, members. Can I again say thank you to the officers who brought that through. Yeah. Now move on to item 11.
Sorry, Chair, can I, just for the benefit of the officers, sometimes less is more.
If I may, for Councillor Busby and other councillors, sometimes trying to summarise 2 years' worth of COVID is quite difficult, and getting it down to 37 slides I think is particularly impressive. But I'm conscious that can be a slog to go through in the council chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Busby. Right, I'd like to move on to item 11, please, to receive reports from Cabinet members. As the leader mentioned in his announcements, he has reintroduced a rolling schedule of Cabinet members, providing reports at each full council meeting. Councillor Davis and Councillor Holt will be doing the first of these this evening. However, Councillor Holt has sent in his apologies, so therefore the report is for noting only. Any questions from members can be sent to the Cabinet member by email. The purpose of this is to provide even greater transparency and access for all councillors to all Cabinet members, and to influence the direction of the respective portfolios. Once Councillor Davis has presented his report, then there will be an opportunity for councillors to ask him any questions, although you can, of course, ask questions of an operational nature. I suspect that Cabinet members will have to refer these questions to officers, and so such questions may be better held and raised outside of the meeting. You may instead want to focus your questions more politically, so that you are more directly questioning each Cabinet member about the nature of the political direction they are bringing to their portfolio. Councillor Davis, Cabinet Member for Communities, would you like to present your report?
Yes, thank you very much. But given the comprehensive report from Nadeem, I don't think I should add an awful lot. It was such a good presentation that I'll just basically wrap up. I'll take Councillor Busby's advice, and it'll be less rather than more. I think fundamentally, as we all do, all our portfolios, but especially within the communities team, we have an end goal. And for me, that end goal is the mental wealth of our residents. And that includes everybody in this chamber, whether they recognise it straight away or not. Everything we in the communities do as part of our various health and wellbeing work, including everything in the paper, increases the mental wealth of our residents. From free swims for our under-16s during the school holidays and the myriad of holiday activities across the district. For example, one I went to at Great Cornard last week during the half term and got roped into pumpkin carving and taken out the guts and everything, to ensuring that we can help those with various limitations to be able to live independently. And it also includes everyone in between by increasing physical activity and mental well-being. We are increasing mental wealth, and that is worth investing in. When you enrich your mental wealth, it makes us all more resilient and increases overall well-being. It also means you are more equipped to support yourself, your friends, and your family. You will see by the paper the vast range of work undertaken by our superb communities team, both over the past 19 months when the pandemic first hit to the present day as we work towards recovery. And we have clearly set out the ongoing work we are committed to achieving. And I'll leave it there. I was going to go through all the various bits, but I don't need to do that. No.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Thank you very much. And I thoroughly agree with you about the mental health side, and hopefully my charity will support that even further. Thank you. Are there any questions for clarification of Councillor Davis' update? Any for clarification? Okay, I shall now move on to item 12 then, which is the BC 2122, political balance and composition of committees. I would like to invite the Deputy Monitoring Officer to introduce the report. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to introduce this paper, BC 2122, which seeks the Council's approval of a revised calculation of the political balance and numerical allocation of seats to committees. This revision is necessary following Councillor Mavisi's move from the Conservative group to the Independent group. You will note from Appendix A that this has resulted in just one seat changing. A seat on the Planning Committee has transferred from the Conservative group to the Independent group. Chairman, I'm sure that many councillors will be aware that there is a meeting of the Planning Committee tomorrow, Wednesday the 3rd of November, as it would be entirely unreasonable for any new committee member to read the agenda papers between now and tomorrow's meeting. I would like to make an alteration to Recommendation 2.1 to insert the words "with effect from the 4th of November 2021 at the end of this recommendation. This will enable the existing committee members, as summoned by the agenda, to participate in the meeting tomorrow.
Just a point. Have you had the papers and read them? If not, we're in no better position. What?
Members, please. No cross.
Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have and would ask for a proposer and seconder.
Thank you. The recommendation that the community... Oh, 2.1. I'm on the right one. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Recommendation that the committee size and numerical allocation of seats be approved as detailed in Appendix A to this report with the effect from the 4th of November 2021. Councillor McLaren.
On page 105 it says this Conservative has got 14 seats. It hasn't, it's got 30.
That's the number of committee seats.
Oh,
yes, that's correct.
Just to clarify for members, because others watching on YouTube, if they won't have heard that answer, but yes, it's the number of committee seats rather than the number of councillors.
Sorry, but I needed to ask the question.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Then I shall ask the Senior Governance Officer to conduct the electronic vote. Thank you. Henriette.
Thank you, Chair. I will now start the vote. I have amended the recommendation to say to agree the amended recommendation 2.1 as detailed in report BC 2122. I'll start the vote now for you. So if you scroll down to the blue line on your agenda to cast your vote. Councillor Beer, may I take your vote, please?
For.
And Councillor Newman? Chair, that is carried.
Thank you. Thank you, members. That brings us to the end of our council meeting. Oh, sorry. Councillor appointments, I do beg your pardon. Councillor Arthur, I think. Councillors, please could you refer to the table papers which contain the details of the appointments that need to be approved? Could I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Arthur. Could I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Plum. We'll now ask the Senior Governance Officer to conduct the electronic vote. I missed that.
Thank you, Chair. The vote is now in progress on your app. Councillor McCraw, may I have your vote, please? Councillor Beer?
Well, could I ask, the councillors' appointments, is that Councillor Barrett and Councillor Sean Dawson? Is that what we're referring to? No? What are these? Oh, sorry. I didn't even realise that was anywhere here. I must have missed it. Yes, I'll certainly support that. Thank you.
I take your vote as for. Councillor Newman, for. Chair, that is 18 votes for and 1 abstention. That vote is carried.
And that now brings us to the end of the meeting, which I apologise. And the date of the next meeting will be Tuesday, the 25th of January 2022 at 5:30. So I trust you will all be in attendance. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Arthur. Thank you. I mean, it's funny. It was a